I saw a couple of headlines that had to do with Tim Tebow. He's working with Steve Clarkson. He's got a quarterback retreat. He's worked with Roethlisberger, Leinart, Gino Toretta, Matt Barkley, Jimmy Clausen, Terrell Pryor, Matt Castle. Played college ball for John Elway's dad. Coached at the University of Miami, the Seahawks, the Niners, and now Tim Tebow. And I wanted to have Steve on because, according to the headlines, Steve has made a lot of improvement with Tim Tebow, and maybe it's not his arm work as much as it is his footwork, and he joins us now. How much of a challenge was this, Steve?
Well, it wasn't really much of a challenge at all. I spent a couple of days with Tim, and we just worked on a few things that I thought could help. I was invited by his agent, Jimmy Sexton, and this is about a couple months back, wanting to know if I could spend some time with him and kind of give my opinion on, if he is fixable. And, I came away with, after a couple of days working with him, with a very favorable, evaluation of, what he was and what he could be. But I want to clarify, I'm not his personal coach. I don't have a relationship with Tim. It was just, like I said, a 2-day deal where I was brought in to just kind of give my opinion or assessment, if you will. And that was it.
Okay, but what specifics were you focusing on with Tebow?
Mainly, we were, he's obviously he's very athletic. And, a lot of guys can teach, throwing mechanics, if you will. But the game, especially at that level, it's very rare that a quarterback can set his feet and, make, throws from perfect throwing platforms, if you will. So what we try to focus on were, he plays the game best when it's chaotic. And so we tried to focus when things break down, what do your feet look like in those moments when you're trying to make a play. And, so our emphasis was really from the waist down. How does his balance work? His sense of awareness, when he's getting battered around in the pocket and having to keep his focus downfield, being in a position to be able to strike, from any position at any time. That was essentially what we were working on.
Can he be a starting quarterback again?
Well, at this rate, it's going to be very difficult because the longer he stays on that roster with the Jets, it's going to be problematic because, most of these spots are being filled. The draft coming up next week, it's going to be very difficult.
But, Steve, is it his skills or the team that he's with that will prevent him from being a starting quarterback?
Well, I think his skill set is fine. He just has to get to a place where, number one, they understand what he's about and, work with what they have. And I think what they have is a lot. The guy's got a very powerful arm. That's not a question. He has an elongated release is what's been reported. But, as I said before, that's attributed to, foot placement, things of that nature. And so those are the things that we worked on to try to shore those things up. Now, what he's been doing since that time, I'm sure he's worked on a great deal of things, but it's not that problematic in my opinion.
But if I'm looking at what he was in Denver, the quarterback, the playmaker who was there, and then I saw a quote. Now, that's why I'm going to ask you if it's true. Did you say that the Broncos sabotaged Tebow by trading him to the Jets?
Well, let me clarify a couple things. Number one, I've written a couple blogs that dated all the way back, like in I want to say late August, early September, where it started off assessing the Jets quarterback situation. And then most recently, I wrote a blog that talked about the sabotage of the quarterback. Wasn't making necessarily reference that the Broncos did anything wrong on their end. It was just looking at it from the outside in. If you're looking at the Broncos, they had a very volatile situation. You're bringing in Peyton Manning, who there's no argument that he should be the quarterback, and that was the right choice. But now, what do you do with Tim Tebow? It was a highly sensitive situation there because you did have a split fan base at some point that really wanted him to be their quarterback and felt like he was dealt unfairly. So I think the thing when you're looking at it, at least common sense would say, man, the one thing that you don't want to have happen is that maybe Peyton doesn't play a season or what have you, or that doesn't go well, mainly because maybe he's not healthy, and Tim Tebow goes someplace else and blows up. Then that's going to it's going to be very tough for your franchise to have to deal with that. So common sense would say, look, you send him someplace where, maybe it's not the best of situation. He's out of your hair and he's somebody else's problem. New York was a willing participant, and it was a perfect scenario because, let's face it, Rex Ryan was, in some hot water there. Mark Sanchez was in a situation where, although I thought he performed, well enough, he wasn't by any means solidified as a starting quarterback. Let's just throw a grenade in their situation, and you kill two birds with one stone.
Who should be the starting quarterback for the Jets?
I believe Mark Sanchez should be the starting quarterback for the Jets. And I said that in that most recent blog. My criticism of the situation was you now have 5 quarterbacks on that roster. And I felt like Mark Sanchez only really had 1 year as a starting quarterback at USC. And I felt like he was on his way. In the beginning, he was handed the job when he first got there as a rookie. He was making strides. He really didn't have any playmakers around him and still doesn't. I don't know who could have survived under those circumstances. And then right when when you're moving in the right direction, the next thing you do is you bring in a high-profile guy that, you're trying to sell as going to be a backup. But anybody that covered that situation, would tell you that everybody expected pretty much what you saw, which was it was going to be volatile, it was going to be, a hodgepodge of stuff, and that it was going to be highly controversial. And ultimately, the way it played out was pretty predictable. So in my opinion, now you're going another step forward. Here's another year where you clearly know that Tim Tebow is not, in your plans. You got 5 quarterbacks on that roster, one of which is David Garrard, who you bring in. He hasn't played for a couple years. And you're still sending a very uncertain message to your fan base, and in particular, your quarterback and your coach, who both basically have 1 year left to prove themselves. So it's just not a productive or positive situation to get something done.
Steve, good to visit with you. We appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, Steve Clarkson, private quarterbacks coach, worked with a few starters in the NFL, including Ben Roethlisberger.